Hi, I'm Meg Major of Winsight Grocery Business. Welcome to Grocery COVID Live. The big story on our minds today is the sobering statistic that U.S. grocery prices have seen the biggest jump in nearly 50 years, primarily due to the rising costs of fresh and processed meat and eggs during the pandemic. To say that the coronavirus has changed the grocery business would be a mild understatement. Joining us to discuss further is our executive editor, John Springer, our content manager, Kat Martin, our senior editor, Jennifer Strailey, and of course, Phil Lempert. Phil, please share your thoughts on the crazy pricing statistics we've heard today.
So, Meg, it's making front page news all over the place. The BLS reports, this 2.6%. They've broken it down 4.3% more on meats, poultry, fish, and eggs, as you pointed out. But I find it very, very, very misleading. If you look at the Nielsen data comparing last week to last year, fresh meat is up 11.8%, fresh beef 10.9%, fresh chicken 10.5%, eggs 26.9%, cow's milk 10.9%. So, it's fine to look at the BLS data across an average, but I really think it's misleading. The other factor for me is keep in mind that more people, practically everybody, is now eating at home. It used to be 50% of our dollars went to eating out, which is typically more expensive than us eating at home. So I think the big takeaway from this is that prices are going to go up. I think we're also going to see some huge investments that are taking place, robotics in meatpacking plants, more cost for supermarket operators with sanitation and so on, that I think we are going to see a couple years growth in prices for all these reasons. And when BLS comes back in May, I don't think it's going to be 2.6%. I think it's going to be a lot higher, especially in these fresh categories.
Yeah, no disagreement. But John and I, during our weekly or our morning meetings, have talked about this in a running state of affairs. John, take it away and chime in with your thoughts.
I mean, there's a lot going on in the inflation front that you've got to confront here. There's look, the cost of getting things out to stores has gone up because of the COVID disruptions to transportation and manufacturing facilities is one issue. The other issue we've talked about on this show plenty of times before, the promotions are going away. So people are paying full retail. The remark I wanted to make today, I heard from a friend this morning who was saying he hasn't bought a can of tuna fish for 3 months because it's never on sale anymore. You have to try to explain to him, there's the retailers have been pulling back on sales and manufacturers have been pulling back on sales because they're spending so much time just trying to, get their shelves stocked. There's a lot of that going on. The other remark I'd make is that, some sources have told me that this inflation that we're seeing now is expected as a result of all the disruption that's going on. But fast forward a few months, the business starts coming back normal in places of the country reopen and alternate venues come back. Well, at that time, the grocers might want to fight to kind of keep this traffic that they've gained during this period. And one way they're going to do that is by investing in price. And that would lead to lower prices. At least that's what's expected down the road. The question is, when does that happen?
Yep. And also, we're starting to see the price freezes. Big Y just announced that they're freezing prices on, Kat, help me out here, 10,000 products.
Yeah. And a lot of that includes center store stuff that hasn't been seeing huge price increases. But I was shocked that they also included fresh chicken in that price, which surprised me, especially as we're seeing the supply kind of tighten up a little bit. And they made the promise that prices could go down, but they'll never go up. And then add more products, and that price freeze will remain in effect until July 1st.
I've also seen some other retailers really showcasing price freezes as well. Giant Eagle, I've noticed on shelf is doing a quiet. I don't necessarily, I'm not a big circular reader, but I've been noticing that as well as a couple of other things. Jenn, you had some pretty insightful commentary in your story that you listened in on Nielsen's webcast of the pandemic purchasing. Anything jumping out to you worth sharing?
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that, prices are continuing to escalate, but I mean, if you look at the percentages, for things like fresh meat, they were saying that's, 11.8, which I think, Phil pointed out, processed meat. So like deli meats, 12.1, sorry, eggs, the 26.9. And, what's more, across the whole store in March, 77% of categories experienced inflation. But, this is to be expected, right? I wonder, when historically, like when I would go to Canada, I'd be like, $6 for a box of cereal. Are you kidding me? But I think our prices have been under what, maybe the standard, and now they're just coming up to maybe where they need to be.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're absolutely right. You go back 2 years ago and grocers were in this period of disinflation or deflation for a long period of time. Whereas, restaurant prices are going up by percentages month by month by month. And, groceries losing, the dollars to the other side. So, this was coming at some point. I think the grocers like a little bit of inflation on a steady state, and they can get their comps and get their leverage. But, these are unusual times. And, to Kat's point on the price freezes, one of the things that sources are telling me is that it's likely that, some grocers will try to kind of get off this promotional juice they've been on forever during the, as under the cover of this crisis, and kind of move toward more to an EDLP, orientation. And we'll kind of see as we kind of come out of that, if things are actually more frothy or less frothy than they've been, on the promotion front.
Yeah,
Hey,
to
Phil,
Jenn's point about, the price of our foods, we've got the cheapest food supply in the world. It's been built that way. That's why we have so many problems at meat packing plants. They've been built for low prices on meat. They haven't been built for anything else. So I think you're right, Jenn. I think the prices are going to go up. The problem is going to be, if we do have a recession, a lot of people are going to be strapped for cash. They're going to be looking at higher prices. Retailers, to what everybody's point was, don't want to increase prices, whether it's price freezes or getting rid of promotions. So I really think that we're going to have a huge problem. The other situation is that farmers, the average farmer loses about $5,400 a year. So they have to have a second job. They're not getting their fair share of that food dollar. Every year that comes out, you see that tiny slice of that dollar bill that the farmers are getting. So the farmers are saying, hey, if we want to stay in business, we've got to make more money. So we're having pressure on price from all these aspects.
Yeah, Phil, when you were talking about that, it reminded me of this event that Hy-Vee held out with the vice president and the USDA secretary and some retailers and meat people. Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa was speaking sort of on behalf of the farmers, who were saying that they couldn't understand why, the prices that they're getting for the meat are going down, and prices for consumers are going up.
Hey, Phil, I was also going to say, springboarding off of your comment at the top of the segment, interestingly, it's like sex sells, prices sell in grocery headlines. I mean, so I found it so interesting that had blown up, but when you really stop and pull back, it is just those two or three big categories that are spiking this high price perception of, which is legitimate, but it's still not reflective of the entire spectrum of purchasing that we've seen. Secondly, I also found interesting, speaking of prices and comparisons, did you see the headlines this week that there was surveys done that customers didn't realize that Instacart and other delivery services prices were more expensive than visiting a store. I don't know if anybody else has seen that, but
Well, yeah, but part of that is true, part of it's not true. So if you go to the Instacart app and you pick a retailer, um, underneath the retailer's banner will say prices same as store or prices above store. So frankly, consumers have a responsibility to read as well. So I mean, Instacart isn't trying to pull anything
right.
off people, but most delivery services will say that.
But
So
I
if you
thought
are
that had
concerned about price, I don't think that Instacart is doing anything wrong, and it's really based on their deal with the retailer.
right.
So a retailer can use Instacart in a bunch of different ways. They can either just use their technology and license that. They can have Instacart do everything, meaning they pick the groceries and deliver them, or they can have their store employees pick the groceries and then Instacart just delivers them. So based on the deal that they put together, that's what's going to dictate if it's the same price in stores or not. And talking about Instacart, Jen, you have a story for us.
Well, Instacart has just been going like gangbusters, obviously, with the skyrocketing demand of grocery delivery, and they just announced a new partnership with Rite Aid this morning to roll out grocery delivery. Not this excludes prescription medication to their 2,700 plus locations in 18 states, and they've said that last week they kind of hit a milestone getting their arms around the pandemic panic grocery delivery buying, and 90% of their deliveries were back to same day or next day, which we've discussed before in previous episodes that what are all these new Instacart shoppers going to think when they try to place an order and they're they can't get anything like a week or
Right.
more out. So
They hired a couple of 100,000 employees, as Jen's reported before. I mean,
yeah.
that's going to have an effect, I guess, on it better have an effect on how quickly they can get those orders out.
But again, keep in mind, and I've spoken to Instacart about this, but keep in mind, you hire somebody new, they're not going to be able to pick groceries as quickly as somebody who's worked in that store or worked for Instacart for a couple of years. So while we do have more bodies, and now we can get, I mean, here in Los Angeles, I can get an Instacart delivery today. There's no question about that. But it's taking longer for them to actually pick the groceries. So it'll be interesting to see once Instacart and Shipt and everybody else catches up with all these new employees, what happens and whether or not the demand is going to be there after this. I mean, we've talked a lot about that maybe it's click and collect that becomes the big winner out of this versus delivery.
But I think all of this stuff that we're talking about, there's a responsibility on the consumer, on the U.S. consumer. Other countries have higher food costs for a reason, and now we're adding higher food costs and the cost of delivery on top of that. And maybe the shoppers in this country need to get better about food waste. We throw away so much of our food,
40%.
There's a way of
our
maximizing your cost effectiveness there that is on the consumer.
Well, Jen, to that point, I think right about now, consumers are going to start getting sticker shock because they've been going on delivery. Now Instacart makes it mandatory to tip at least 10%. To your point, no coupons, no promotions to speak of. I can't use my frequent shopper card, and there's a delivery charge. So now when I get my credit card bill, I'm going to, have cardiac arrest because what's happened is my prices that I'm paying on groceries could be 35% higher than they were when I use click and collect or go into the store myself.
And that doesn't even, take into effect the things you said about how the food supply works and the things that might need to happen as a result of this pandemic that's going to make them, the production and the delivery and the of them more expensive. So yeah, it's an issue.
So is the answer going to dark supermarkets? The UFCW president has said that and recommended that we start to have these dark supermarkets where they don't allow people in, that it's either workers or robots that are picking all these groceries for delivery. Is that the solution?
This has been one of the things that's been talked about for a long time in the US and it is a little bit more common in Europe. But the reason it was more common in Europe than in the US is because they had, among other things, a higher volume of online orders coming. Now in the US, suddenly, as we've talked about before, it's matured 5 years in 5 weeks, and this is becoming a kind of a solution that makes sense. A lot of grocers have a lot of grocery stores that probably do better as e-commerce hubs than grocery stores now. Not to mention the ones that are already closed and still on the books that they're still paying rent on. Hey, let's make good use of that. And we're finally seeing the volumes that would support that.
I've been actually surprised that we haven't seen a greater uptick of dark stores. In the past couple of months, it's been very, very light in experimentation in my mind, but I think it's a time that's come for the US as well. Phil, I think backing up one pace, click and collect all along in our book has been poised for the definitive platform for e-commerce. So I just kind of wanted to toss that out there, as I don't see that as going anywhere and instead going to become even more important to a retailer's playbook.
Yeah. Meg's right about that. Ahold and Albertsons both in recent weeks have talked about increasing the number of sites that offer click and collect above and beyond what they were already doing, which was pretty substantial in those areas. And the grocers like that because it's a little less expensive and complicated for them than executing the delivery, which oftentimes takes, it requires bringing in a third party to do that.
See, what I think is going to happen is we're going to take the traditional 40,000 square foot store, we're going to cut it in half. So in the back, robotics, and that's going to be all those grocery products, all the center store items that I'm going to pre-order. In the front of the store is going to be all those fresh items. I want to pick my own produce. I want to pick my meat. I want to talk to Bob the butcher and Betty the baker and all that. So I'm going to shop for all these fresh foods. And then on the way out, I'm going to have that order all pre-packed for me, just going to walk out the door and really still have a great shopping experience. Because the problem that I've got with dark stores is we lose the emotion, the freshness, the experience of food. And I'm not willing to give that up as a consumer. So yeah. I would love to see this hybrid model.
I don't disagree with you, what you say, but I'm not looking at it from the standpoint of experiential. I think in so many markets, we're just plain old overstored. Yep. So for instance, to just close down select stores in different pockets, not only for the traditional function of a delivery or click and collect model, I think a lot more retailers need to use store environments to do experiments better, to do focus labs. I look at things, a lot of empty boxes, and I think, wouldn't it be cool to do some virtual experimentation, and instead of just online and telephone focus groups or even just man on the street, to actually bring consumers into environments to be sort of test pilot dummies for some different things. I just think retailers need to get a little bit more creative with their real estate.
And I wonder if Phil just didn't describe the open Amazon store in Los Angeles.
Yeah, I mean, it's open, but for delivery only.
Yeah.
They still have not opened it, which is curious, because I think I mentioned before, I know a contractor who's working in there. I have not seen pictures of it. I have not been in it, but just described a lot of fresh food, a lot of salad bars, which we know are going to go away, a lot of hot food bars, a lot of prepared foods. So I think before it opens, they're going to have to, spend some money and redo it.
Probably so. Yeah.
Yeah, and that Nielsen webinar that I attended last week, Scott McKenzie from Nielsen was talking about there's going to be, massive reinvention at retail and a whole reimagination of that experience, and that that retailers need to be in both listening and action mode right now. All of these ideas that we kick around, I mean, many of them are viable, but the old store is not going to be the new store. But there's got to be a process of figuring out what is going to work in the future, what's going to resonate with shoppers when we come out of this.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about when you were saying that, Jen, was, Walmart just did this express delivery, and they described having, tested and rolled this thing out in a matter of 2 weeks. So things are moving fast, right? And that's, the retailers have kind of adopted this language of the technology field where you fail fast and learn, as they say. And so we're seeing some innovation coming quickly. Like I said, the grocers are changing their plans pretty quickly. But yeah, there's also there's going to be a period where you're going to figure out what it is that they can do. But they're testing it quickly.
In fact, John, on that express delivery, a lot of controversy about Walmart and other stores trying it as well, charging that $10 fee. Do you think that $10 fee is going to stick and they're actually going to keep that, or is it going to go away?
I think they're going to keep it. They just had another release today to kind of give a little bit more explanation behind the technology around it. But I think with the interesting thing that we found out about that was that, that option of a express delivery doesn't even come up if Walmart's not able to execute it. So as I said previously, I think this is a way to kind of win share, not necessarily more from Walmart shoppers, but perhaps frustrated shoppers of other retailers that go to Walmart and say, oh, I found a place that can get me my groceries quickly.
So Meg, any good news for the day before we wrap up?
No, nothing special.
I have some good news.
Yeah, you got some Girl Scout goodness, Kat.
Yeah. So Harmon's in Utah is helping out the Girl Scouts. So as we all know, it's annual Girl Scout selling season, cookie season. And they had to obviously cut it short because they wanted to keep their Scout members and the general public safe. So Harmon's has stepped in and is now selling Girl Scout cookies in their stores. So
Very cool.
one can go and get their Thin Mints. I wish. And so and all of the proceeds are going right back to Girl Scouts. Harmon's isn't taking anything. They're just donating the shelf space.
Yay to Harmon's. They're awesome. Phil, I was going to only say the other good thing that I kind of think is good is we filed a story today, a continuing coverage of the COVID-19 test sites that Kroger's really leading the way for. And I wonder why more retailers aren't sort of joining that bandwagon. They're teaming up with, and grant you, Kroger Health has that advantage, but I really think what better place to conduct COVID-19 tests than with a grocery partner. So I tip my hat to Kroger for the efforts it's doing with aiming to get 100,000 people tested by the end of this month, even though that's probably a drop in the bucket. I think it's great and would love to see more retailers get behind testing efforts.
And Meg gets our last word for today's COVID-19 broadcast. So make sure you add comments. We will review them, get back to you, and include them in next week's. Don't forget, Tuesday and Thursday, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's on Winsight Grocery Business Facebook page, as well as Supermarket Guru Facebook page. And if you missed an episode, hey, it's easy. Just go right there or to our websites, and you can catch up. Have a good week.